Here, when I was a grad faculty fellow, basically what that is that there are a couple of faculty members each year in grad college who are asked to work on issues of particular interest that need development or attention. And so the idea of mentorship is something that obviously we all do informally. And Dr. Maldonado has spearheaded a great program that I was the beneficiary of, working on mentorship more generally for faculty. But nobody really kind of spent the time thinking about the relationship specifically between faculty and graduate students here. So that I was given that task, and sort of the most tangible result of that was that we built this webpage on the grad college website, which I'll talk about in a minute. But there were a couple of major issues that we thought were important to look at that related both to faculty but also to graduate students. And one of the things that we really wanted to do was to create some resources that faculty and students could use together, and to help build bridges where bridges needed to be built, and to support faculty in teaching graduate students how to be mentors also, as well as mentoring them. Faculty become good graduate mentors. So starting the process early when people first came to the university, so that not only could we help avoid bad mentoring relationships in the future, but that we would really help new faculty get a handle on what this task, which can be a huge task, and spend a good amount of time on it rather than a voluminous amount of time on it, but also do it well, and maybe bring what had gone well for them as graduate students themselves. Sometimes it's hard to turn that into your own mentoring process. So we thought it would be worth trying to create some resources for faculty and to make that an explicit goal of the graduate college. Then the sort of next piece of the puzzle was, and we did this in conjunction with the GPSA as well, is to think about helping students get the best mentoring experience that they could. To help students understand what the process was, what the expectations should be, how to manage situations that weren't going well, and to create some resources for students also. This is also connected to Marianne Winklemas's Transparency in Learning and Teaching and Learning project, which has been a great resource. So one of the things this webpage is trying to do is kind of connect some of the resources we already have on campus together in an easy place for people to connect to it. One of the challenges, I think, about talking about mentoring in a big umbrella way like this is that every department really does do things differently. And the sort of pedagogical approaches to teaching are quite different. So one of the things that I think the graduate college hopes is that they can foster some specific mentoring activities. GAs are central, obviously, to the success of all of our graduate programs, not just supporting graduate students, but also doing a very important teaching work that the graduate assistants and research work that they do. So one of the things that didn't come out of this project, but came up about the same time, is the new graduate assistant handbook, which was written last year. And so one of the things, too, is we really wanted to open conversations to get people to really talk about not only how that relationship between faculty and students could be fair, but also how faculty and students could get the most out of that relationship, and really remind ourselves that that's a learning experience as well as a way of paying your rent and kind of keeping body and soul together. One of the things that we discovered in that workshop is that it's really just good to have conversations about these things. That people actually have a lot of really good ideas or good experience, and that sharing best practices, which is a really simple thing to do, just needs to be encouraged. So that is, in a very simple way, what this website is trying to do too. So again, here's just a whole list of resources available from other places, and here's a link to this idea of these mentor memos. Right, here's University of Washington, and they have a whole variety of different resources. So it just saves you from roaming around the web by yourself. And then this is always the hardest part, right? When things aren't going well, we always hope that's not going to happen, but it happens maybe more often than we would like. And I mean, one of the things I think that Graduate College is most committed to sort of underpinning this project is to really help solve problems before they get to the point where they're unsolvable or where people are really in jeopardy of not progressing toward their degree or having to look for a new advisor. So just acknowledging, I think, also that that happens and helping people to talk about problems early is sort of the goal of this section. Interesting to think about in relation to is the role that the grad college representative plays on your committee. That person is really there to make sure that you're getting, you know, a correct, rule-based process. They don't always necessarily engage intellectually with the project, but when people can, it really is nice to get a sort of extra free person on your committee to a certain degree. And it would be nice, I think, to help, particularly students who weren't here as undergraduates, connect to faculty in other departments, because that's who you need for that role. And so usually I think students rely upon their advisors, and we all have relationships with each other, and we do it for each other, which is not a bad way of doing it, except that it keeps the pool pretty small, right? And it actually prevents exactly what Dr. Maldonado was talking about, which is, you know, getting people to know a broader spectrum of faculty outside their department. So that might be a well worth working on that project.
Well, why don't we turn over to Dr. Maldonado then, and then after that, is even this first question that opens up. All of you should be thinking about things you'd like to talk about with our collective minds put to bear.
My role in the office of the Vice Provost of Faculty Affairs is really to help acclimate new faculty to the world of academia. We do have faculty who are first-generation faculty. We have faculty who are transitioning from graduate student role into the faculty role, and they experience many of the same things that you all as graduate students do. They're trying to understand what this life in academia is like. And so I'm responsible for planning and delivering the new faculty orientation, and I provide mentoring services and faculty development. And my background in workforce development is exactly that, right? We're about supporting and encouraging and developing people, and I'm very, very passionate about that part of it. However, sometimes the structure in academia makes it very difficult to do that well. Again, we're very discipline-oriented, we're very siloed, and again, sort of the people we have access to tend to be very limited unless you actively engage in campus, and the life of faculty is quite busy. You're not only teaching and planning and working with faculty on curricular issues, you're also working with and advising students, and that's not training that we typically get in the PhD program. So this is really awesome that the UNLV is really investing in your careers as future mentors, but also future faculty members. But I think from a literature perspective, people define mentoring really differently, and a lot of people have different expectations of that. And most people transition in their role based on their own experiences. So if you had a really horrible mentoring experience, you're probably not going to mentor students very well, right? You hope that you're in this business to really help and develop future faculty in their role, create and mentor future faculty members for academia, and that you take an interest in making sure that people have what they need to be supportive. So some of the commonalities, again, I'm going research. The commonalities identified in the research really are that mentoring relationships are usually focused on achievement or acquisition of knowledge. So there's always a learning component to that didactic relationship. It consists of three broad components. There's the emotional support, and the psychological support, and there's the skill-based, understanding what skills you need to be successful. And I'm assuming most of you are PhD students? No? Wrong assumption? Okay. There's role modeling involved in mentoring. And mentoring, there are benefits for both the mentor and the mentee in a relationship, but the relationship should be reciprocal. So the mentee also provides some opportunities for the faculty member to learn. And it's very personal in nature. So advising and mentoring are two different things. You know, you are assigned an advisor, and that job and that role of that advisor is really to help you understand the process and to provide you guidance on curricular issues and what courses to take next, and you know, the progression of courses and those kind of things. But mentoring goes a little bit deeper. And as Dr. Gray mentioned, I've mentored quite a number of PhD students. I was, at a time, the only faculty member in my department, in my program, that grew to almost 40 students. So I was mentoring quite a bit. Like I said, I graduated 5 students last year. I hooded 5 students last year. So I spend quite a bit of time with my students, usually on my personal time, and that's something I'm committed to. And I read quite a number of books on mentoring, and it's quite interesting what the literature says about what a mentor should be, right? That when they describe their characteristics and their traits and things that they should do, they're almost listed as, oh my God, does someone have really all of those characteristics? Almost like, you know, an angel walking on earth. But you know, that does take a very special person to mentor. Someone has to have the compassion and the willingness to give of self to mentor those relationships. And students, you know, they know what they want. They want someone. They know when someone cares about them, genuinely, right? So it's not a transactional relationship, but it's a transformational relationship. And I have some transactional relationships with students. Sometimes students are willing and open to working with me, and some of them do it because they know I'm the only one, and there are others who I form lasting relationships with. So I have quite a number of students who continue to call me even 10 years after teaching them. And it's just, you know, so part of building that relationship, right, it's being honest and making sure that you communicate your needs and what it is that your expectations are. And I've learned over the years, mentoring for me hasn't always been easy, and I haven't always done it right, but I realized that because we all define mentoring quite differently, that you do have to be explicit about what it is the expectations are. This is what I'm going to do for you. This is what you need from me. Well, I don't know if I'll be able to provide that. I have X, Y, Z to do. I have so much amount of time, but this is what I'm willing to do to compromise. I think those open dialogues and those communication sessions do need to happen in order to build that trust and to build that psychosocial relationship that students need. Going to school is hard, and you also have a life, right? And so I don't expect my students to work on my behalf constantly, because I do understand they have their own families, they have, financial issues that they're worried about, and usually when I meet with a student, I sit down and say, hey, tell me how you're doing. What's going on in your life? What's going on? What can I do to help you? How's your writing going? Okay, well, you're not progressing. You need to get on the ball. This is our guideline. But again, the most active students, the most proactive students are those that come with an agenda. There are multiple phases to that, right? It's understanding, first of all, what you need and what you want from the mentor, and being able to plan and communicate those with your mentor. And then there's a task of finding a mentor. So your advisor may fill a need, but may not necessarily be the person you want or need as a mentor. And your point about getting to know other folks on campus is really important, because you tend to go to the person you see or the people you see often. But there are lots of wonderful people on campus that have, different knowledge bases that may support your particular needs, whether it be psychosocial, or whether it be skill-based or career-based knowledge. And sort of the new models of mentoring do say that a networked approach is really the best approach, because not one person could provide you everything that you need. So being open to that is really important as well. Things to look for in a mentor how available is that person? I'm not available that much, but the students, most of my students are not traditional, so they work. So I meet with them after hours. And I've been here till midnight, 1 o'clock, trying to help someone get through the dissertation defense or prepare for the proposal. I've met with them at my house, you know, or meet with them out, we have wine and drinks. So it really becomes a personal relationship. I have one that, and I didn't do this while I was their mentor, but we became such good friends. We traveled together. So she's graduated now. We didn't do that until after she graduated, because there is sort of a limit on, you know, things that you should do with students. But you become lifelong friends, and it's really, really a great and enriching experience from my part. And I do love the fact, even though I'm in administration, I love the fact that I still interact with students. Also, the job of the mentee is to cultivate that relationship. So, you know, relationships are based on trust. And, you know, you do what you say you're going to do. You follow through. And you're, again, you're proactive, and you plan. And I think people love to see that. I know as a professor, I connect more with students who tend to be more proactive than those that are passive. And you ask questions, you actively listen. You never know, even through personal dialogue, where those interests overlay, and there might be ideas for collaboration. I've presented with students, I've written with students, I've, you know, suggested students, I've nominated students for awards based on my interactions with them. And then, of course, there's the separation phase of the relationship. And sometimes separation doesn't necessarily mean the end of the relationship. It's just the end of the student-mentee relationship, and then it progresses into other things, which is what's happened with quite a number of my students. You know, we separate as a mentor-mentee, but then we form different kinds of relationships after that's over with. So I have this article for you to review, and I think it's making the most of the mentor. Maybe I'll share with Elizabeth or send it to Kendall so that they can upload it to the website.
So one of the things that I think is the biggest struggle, right, is what's too much and what's too little, and also that I think we have a kind of romantic idea of what this relationship is going to be. I know my dad was a professor. He was a sociologist, but he'd been trained as a scientist, so he ran his graduate students like a research group, which meant that they literally like played dollhouse with me. They came to our, you know, they like lived in our house practically. So I just thought this was normal, right? That, you know, and so when I was a graduate student, I was really shocked that my advisor didn't treat me in that same way. This was not his style, so my dad, it turned out, was unusual. At first I was sort of taken aback, because I thought that was sort of what it was going to be like. But I think learning to embrace the emotional connection when it's there, but also to feel comfortable if it's not, right? To know that you can get good mentoring from somebody who's not necessarily going to be your lifelong friend is a good, an important thing to balance that, right? To not necessarily feel like you are missing out on something if you don't get that bond, because the bond, I think, is more unusual. And it's great when it happens.
And it's organic.
But yeah, you can't be sure that you're going to travel with your advisor after she's not your advisor anymore. That's a nice thing that happens.
So Dr. Nolan, the idea of networking, right? So you have mentors who are going to help you perhaps expand different career potentials or different skill components. Perhaps you don't have an emotional connection with that person, but you do have intellectual like-mindedness, so that you can certainly garner something from that. I think maybe the romanticism comes from all of those, you know, the Greek mythology and the Greek society, that says, that idea that the person who mentors you, particularly when you're dealing with intellectual property, your ideas are your first baby, right? So you're going to have to share that with someone. It's almost like a marriage. It's very intimate. So I think it's important that you do find at least one mentor that gives you that kind of emotional support, that person who you do feel comfortable divulging Because if you're not writing, usually you're not writing because you don't feel like it, it's something else is there. And if you don't have someone that you can share that something else with, and particularly for first generation students, UNLV in particular has a huge number of students who are not just first generation college, but first generation graduate students. Oh my goodness. And there's no one in their world who can relate to them, understand that. For a lot of people, it's just a paper, it's just a book. But this is actually something you live and breathe, and you have to have somebody who understands that on an emotional level, not just intellectual.
Well, so one thing I would say about though, just in sort of looking forward, right, particularly for those of you who might be going into academic careers, this is something that we thought a lot about in this project in the grad college, is because those relationships are so important, one of the things that happens to new junior faculty is they throw themselves into those relationships, and it's an enormous amount of not just time, but emotional time. And that you really do, there really is too much, right? Even though we have this romantic idea and we strive for it, that as professionals, both as graduate students and as faculty, we really have to manage the time we invest in this so that A, the time is well spent and it's good, but so that it doesn't consume your life. Because you will find as faculty, right, that there are students who are incredibly needy, sometimes in a totally legitimate way, but in ways that you can't fulfill all those needs, and they don't know where the boundaries are. So helping people understand how this really is a self-managed process, and that's not said unkindly, that's essential, right? If you're going to have success in any kind of academic career, you have to understand how to self-manage the process as a student, as a faculty member, as an administrator, right? Because people will ask you for everything, especially if you're good at it, and that's great, right? But you're going to have to learn like where the edges of things are. So I think that one of the ways to learn those edges is just to be realistic about that romanticism and to kind of temper it with, okay, pragmatically, what is this? What are we trying to get out of this relationship together, as well as what can I give you or what can you give me? And I think often when things go wrong, it's that people feel they aren't getting what they deserve, but they aren't clear about what actually the terms of that relationship are, and so that expectations get skewed too much or too little on one side or the other. So I guess I would just say be careful, right? I mean, I'm a historian of sentimentalism, so nobody knows better than I, right, how dangerous that idea is. But be careful of that, right? Be for yourself, but also, you know, so that those lines don't get too blurry in moments in which, you know, it can skew what is a productive working relationship.
I have a story about that. So I had a student who totally had expectations of me that hadn't been communicated with me. And I did feel like we were kind of bumping heads at some point. You know, like she would always argue with me about ideas and things that I said, look, you need to change this. And she would argue. I said, why are you always arguing with me? I'm trying to help you through the process. And so finally we sat down and had a conversation, and we went to a Starbucks and we talked about it. And she says, look, this is my expectation. I expect that you're going to be there at my beck and call. And she didn't say beck and call. Basically, that's my interpretation. You're going to be there for me. I can come to your house and do all these things. So I said, look, but you're just starting the writing process. That happens eventually, but I've got 19 of you. I can't do that for everyone. And yes, I want to see you succeed, but you've got to come with some stuff first before we get to that point. And the closer you get to proposal and dissertation, the more time I spend with you. I'm not trying to ignore you. Well, I'm just going based on someone else's experience who was always at a professor's house. I said, honey, that's not going to happen with me right now. Not right now. I just got too many. I'm willing to help you. I'll spend extra time with you. And we did. We Skyped. You know, when it came time, she graduated about a year ago, and she, you know, we did eventually kind of get over that hump, and we were able to work together really well. We Skyped sessions in the evening, on the weekends, whenever needed. She came to my office. We were there late. So she seemed satisfied with the emotional support that I gave her, but she was expecting that way too early, and because of that, there was, you know, we were bumping heads.
And she had 15-minute appointments. And that was it. When your 15 minutes was up, you were out the door. And I was like, what is wrong with her? Why does she do that? But this was why she did it, and this was an interesting thing, that she was one of the very first female faculty members on the faculty at Yale. And at the time when I was there were a few others, but not many. And that what she had discovered when she was a young faculty member was that any woman student wanted her attention, that the time that she could spend, right, taking care of legitimate needs that students had and the students who didn't have other places to get it was voluminous. So she had for herself created these boundaries. They were a little rigid, maybe, but they were also efficient, right? And there was, if you needed more than 15 minutes, one of my great, this was sort of a funny triumph where she was so enraged by my dissertation prospectus that she talked to me for 45 minutes. And I was like, yes! It was not necessarily positive, but it was a funny kind of triumph. So she would, I think, bend those rules when there was something really stuck in her craw, perhaps in that case. But right, the boundaries are hard to communicate. And so one of the things kind of along those same lines, the reason we sort of thought of really trying to make this resource a resource for students and faculty together is to help graduate students, in a sense, see the parts of mentoring that you can do for yourself, right? That not only to learn how you can be better mentors to undergraduates or graduate students in the future, but to see what that role really is and to decide how much you need from somebody else and how much you can give to yourself and how much you can get from your peers, right? From advanced graduate students, how much you can help new graduate students to create a more kind of organic relationship to these tasks that are less hierarchical.
And the same thing happens with faculty of color. I mean, I made all the mistakes being a faculty of color. I mentor a lot of students of color. Matter of fact, every single one of my graduates were students of color. So I'm very, very proud that I have been successful in that area. But yeah, it is that's sort of that, there was an article in the Chronicle about a year ago about the invisible workload for faculty of color. And it's exactly that. People see, there's not a lot of us on campus, and so when they see us, like, oh, so I know that she understands, and so they come and they come and sit, and I advise students that weren't even in my department because of that. So that does happen. I just wasn't that rigid. I was always
right. Well, I think she had become rigid over time. She's also maybe a more rigid personality. But this is, I do think, I would speak from my own experience that there are days when I suddenly think, oh my gosh, I am doing like all of these things to help all of these other people succeed, and what am I doing to help myself succeed? Right? When am I actually setting aside time to read my own writing or work on my own research instead of performing this task for somebody else? And that the management of your own time so that mentoring is rewarding is really important. Because it is easy, as I'm sure Dr. Maldonado will tell us, to burn out on this, right? Even with students who you're really fond of, who are really worthy of your time, who are hard workers, that if you're not, in a sense, taking care of your own intellectual needs, then you're not doing the best job you can taking care of other people's intellectual needs too. And those boundaries are really hard to see, because if someone is sitting across the desk from you and they really need help, it's hard not to help them. Even if you had set aside that time to do something else, that the emergency of somebody else's needs can supersede your own. And so I think you need to understand that when you're mentoring people, but you also need to understand that when you're talking to your own mentor, that when there's resistance to do what you hope that person will do, it may not be because they're resisting you, but because they have other things that they also are responsible for accomplishing, and that's invisible, I think, sometimes.
Again, I love working with students, but I do sometimes ignore myself in that process, and it's been damaging. I'm still an associate professor because of that. So
well, me too. In that you do need, especially when you're a faculty member and you don't have somebody like saying to you, you're not progressing. Well, sometimes the chair of your department will say this to you, but only on a sort of yearly basis. That you need that voice in your own mind saying, it's Friday afternoon, this is when I do my own work, or whenever time you set aside for yourself, so that you don't just answer one more email, or write one more letter of recommendation, or read one more draft, or have one more email conversation. Those things still need to be done, but that they're not as effectively done, right, if those other things get pushed to the side. And it's easy, we can tell you millions of examples of how that happens, because we do care a lot about other people's progression, and that's one of the things that we love about what we do. So that's a balance to think about for yourself.
It's very satisfying too. When it's altruistic. When you're helping someone else and someone else succeeds. One of the students that I mentored won the Johnny Brendan Award. He's getting funded to make his first film. And I just was like, oh, and everyone's like, and you didn't enter the contest, why?
Right.
Well, my script is,
Exactly.
so close. And an organizational specialist at one of the companies that I worked for as an analyst, they had a trainer come out, and she said, you have to date yourself. Every week in your calendar, you have to block off time. And she's like, you don't pencil you in, you don't even ink you in. You take a Sharpie in bright ultra magenta and you color that area, and that is your time, and it's only your time. You don't give it to anyone else on your Outlook or whatever online calendar you got. It's blocked off, and you don't sacrifice it for any reason. And a lot of times you have to like go to your boss or whoever and say, look, this is my time, is really important. Can we not schedule important meetings during my special time? And if you miss your special time, you have to make it up to yourself. And that, like this notion of dating myself, where this had to be my time and I couldn't answer other people's anything, really made a huge difference in terms of my personal productivity. Didn't get me into the contest, but stuff. There were other stuff.
But it laid the foundation.
It laid the foundation. I'm on track with my thesis and all of that good stuff, because, so for all you guys, date yourselves. You're so worthy.
Mentoring can be a great form of procrastination, right?
Oh,
it's a really self-affirming form of procrastination, which is not to say it's not important work to do, right? But that it is much harder to sit in front of your own blank computer screen with your own ideas than it is to help somebody else untangle their ideas. And so, I mean, I often have this experience where I give someone advice, and I'm like, that is good advice. I should do that.
That's
You know. So when you have that little voice in your head, take your own advice. You know. I mean, I like that idea of the magenta.
I noticed the website has graduate faculty mentoring, and you mentioned there's a lot of like undergrad mentoring, but are there graduate mentoring or doctoral mentoring? Like you mentioned, a lot of your students are either working or there's a lot of expectations, meaning like, are there mentoring so that they're aware of like you mentioned, like your story, they're not writing, maybe they don't understand the expectations. Are there a program currently for new people or whoever that might need that, so you can lay the foundation, hey, if these are the expectations in academia, so if you feel like you don't have, or certain areas that you're not up to par, let's discuss this now before you prolong. Because I mean, I've read there's a lot of retention problems. I mean, people who are not graduating like in the college for 8 years, and they're something that's been going. I mean, they're still taking courses, but they're not graduating their doctoral PhD program.
Well, this is an issue of concern, kind of broad concern. So the GPSA, right, is one place where Dr. Gray is a big part of this. The idea of kind of creating workshops and just fora for people to connect to other students and get that advice. We really are trying to encourage that kind of mentoring of new graduate students department by department, and by helping faculty. We're hoping that the faculty will help students. That sounds a little too trickle down to be a direct answer to your question, but it's a little hard to do a big blanket thing because departments are so different and expectations are so different. So, I mean, one of the places that we hope you get that kind of mentoring is from your graduate coordinator, right? Who's the person who's telling you kind of, okay, this is what your program looks like, and this is what you should be doing, and this is how you should be progressing. So we've been putting in place in the graduate college a variety of different ways to sort of articulate the role of that person more specifically and to get feedback from students. You know, are you getting that kind of advising? If you're not, you know, how can we help make that better? But progression and retention is sort of on the top of the pile of interest in the graduate college over the last couple of years, because it is central to the success of the graduate programs. And you know, and it's complicated because people don't progress because of financial reasons, of personal reasons, sometimes of bad advising, but a lot of it tends to be, you know, things that are not as easily controllable as we hope. And retention, you know, a lot of people come to graduate school and then it's not what they expect, or it's just, you know, you have a lot of students who are working. We have an unusual and complicated, sort of non-traditional graduate college, which we love, but does present a wide variety of issues.
And you guys have seen me wave this book around before. The Professor is In by Karen Kelsky. This is one of the books I'll be talking about, where she has a section there on mentoring, what you as a grad student should think about if you want to have a successful relationship with your mentor, including going on to academic positions. Like for, among other things, for example, your mentor is not necessarily your friend. If your mentor has too much time, that's not a good thing. You want someone who's active, busy, engaged, can foster your success, and the 15-minute time chunks, sometimes this is reflective of someone who's really busy and productive, who can help you in ways that someone else who is, let's say, emeritus. She says, don't work with someone who's emeritus as your primary advisor. That person has all the time in the world, but maybe sort of checked out in other ways. But beyond that, a question I would pose to each of you is, have you talked with your mentor or mentors about expectations? This was a theme I think both Dr. Maldonado and Dr. Nelson talked about. Have you talked about the expectations? Do you think you have a good understanding of what they expect from you and you expect from them? And if you can't say yes, you probably should, because that's the start of this.
There's a checklist on this. Having that written down and just having that conversation really helped just make that transparent. You know, sometimes it didn't work out the way the document suggested that it would, but then if it didn't work out, then there was an easier way to have that conversation about why didn't this work out. You'd say, well, I had my appendix out, you know, and that was harder than I thought, right? Mm-hmm. Or, you know, I binge watched too much Grey's Anatomy, and I can really stop doing that. But I think that is one of the things that happens when things don't go right, is that people get upset that things aren't going well, and then it's really hard to have those conversations from both the perspective of the mentor or the mentee about why things didn't turn out the way that they did. So having some kind of little agreed upon document, even if it's very simple, is a good checkpoint, because then you can say, okay, well, we agreed on this and we accomplished it or more, hooray, or we agreed on this and we didn't accomplish it, is there a good reason why it didn't happen, or, you know, is this the moment where you kind of have to, you know, buck up and change your mode of doing what you're doing, right? Date yourself, you can give all these advice to your students. But the more transparent and explicit these things are, the better it is. Because not everyone feels comfortable talking about themselves and their needs and their expectations. And so ritualizing that, I think, does help too. Because then if you're not if you're a shy person about those things, then there's a structure there to sort of support and protect you.
So I really talk a lot about what that process is about. And they don't really understand until they're actually going through the process. And then the other thing, I'm kind of raw with my feedback. You know, your writing sucks. If you can't handle it, then you don't need to be with me. But I do it from a caring place, and they know that. And so, with all my love, with all my love, your writing sucks. You need to get your butt in gear. You know, so I'm really a mothering figure. That's just my nature, to be very nurturing. But I'm raw, and they know it, and they love it. You know, once they understand where I'm coming from, they understand that. But I do have to tell them, you know, this is who I am, and this is how I work. And if you can deal with that, great. I'm willing to work with you. If not, then, you know, I'll help you as much as I can. But, you know, I suggest you work with another advisor.
You have to be sort of tiger mom, right?
Yeah.
But you don't want somebody who's not going to tell you the truth. You don't want somebody who's not going to tell you that your writing sucks, because if your writing sucks, that's a big problem that you have, right? That person, whoever your advisor is, will be done with you, and your writing will still suck if they didn't tell you that. And that's a huge professional problem for you. So I think everybody needs to have a thicker skin sometimes than we do from both sides of that relationship, because it should be a relationship of hard truths to a certain degree.
And sometimes they self-remove themselves, because they realize they can't cut it. I don't believe my role is to tell someone you can't do this, or you won't do this, or I won't. My role is to mentor students to get to the level they need to get to. So I provide them the resources. I'll spend extra time with them, and I says, look, your writing is not up to par, but I'm willing to help you if you work with me. But if you're going to work against me or get angry with me because you're not doing what you need to do, then maybe perhaps you need to think about doing something else or working with someone else who's willing to do that. And sometimes it's a personality clash. I've had that happen before. And I've had other students who, think I'm, boo-boo the fool and can tell me anything and think that I believe it. I'm just quiet about it. And I had a come to Jesus meeting with a student, made him cry, male. And I said, you are the most talented student I know, but you're the biggest artist that I know. And I said, I don't say anything because I want you to think that I don't care, but the reality is I know what you're doing, and you need to get off of that and get serious. If you want to work with me, and his products have been outstanding since then. You know how you kind of mess around and you don't, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. He spent the whole year telling me how much writing he did, and when he finally turned in something, he was like, I was like, come on now. I understand exactly where you're going. So, but and I says, I feel like you're disrespecting me by doing this. And I says, and that's when he broke down. He says, no, I respect you to the most. I said, well then get serious and do an honest job and provide honest, do an honest job in what you're doing. And so it's been, again, I confronted the issue and he's completely turned around. So, but again, that's who I am. They know that. It doesn't work for everyone though.
Right, that there are people who come to graduate school, and it's really not for them, right? And I think we all, as faculty, always recognize that everybody comes to graduate school with uneven skills, right? And that this is one of the things I think is great about the graduate college at UNLV is we're really committed to saying, okay, right, you have great ideas, you have great potential, writing's a little rough, we'll work on that, right? Writing is a skill. If you work on it, you get better at it. But for students who either don't work on it or can't make the progress in those first couple of years to put them in a place where they are going to be competitive in their field, it is really not fair to let students who are not competitive spend the money and the time to get close to a degree or even scrape over the edge of a degree that then they don't have the skills to use professionally. And what happens is, you get invested in people, you like them, they're nice people, you want them to succeed, you pump time and energy into helping them succeed, and then it doesn't happen very often, but occasionally there's a moment where you do have to say to somebody, look, this is not PhD level work. And if you say that 3 or 4 times and it doesn't change, then that's a really hard, it's really hard to, in a sense, take away somebody's dreams, right? And usually that's the conversation where the other person will say, this is my dream. And then you have to say, well, if it's your dream, then these are the things you have to achieve. And if you're not achieving those things, then getting those letters after your name doesn't mean anything if you don't have the skills that go with them. So that's really hard to hear as a student, no question, but it's really hard to say as a mentor or as an advisor also. But it is back to this question of honesty, that it is essential to be honest in this role, even in hard places like that, because letting people sort of dangle along and pursue degrees that they really aren't going to be able to finish to anyone's satisfaction, even their own satisfaction, is heartbreaking, right? Because it's a use of all kinds of resources that doesn't make sense for either party. And those are happily not very often do these things happen, but they do happen. And it's a very difficult moment, because you don't want to say in those moments, you suck, you shouldn't be here, because that's a really mean thing to say, even if it's true, right? So to find ways of, among other things, explaining to students, hey, you have a lot of great skills, they just aren't being used to their best advantage in this environment, that you need to reimagine what your career goals are so that those skills actually are effective in that arena. And this happens to undergraduates who come straight into a graduate program and have never really seen the world. It happens to people who have a romantic notion of how cool and fun it will be to be a professor, and without thinking about any of the drudgery or the work that's involved. And so those are hard. Nobody ever likes to make anyone cry in their office, although we all have boxes of Kleenex, just in case, which is an important mentoring tool that I learned from Dr. Morgan. But yeah, those conversations are the hardest.
That one of the first conversations I have is really understanding what the goals of the student are. I have working adults, and workforce development is such a broad field. A lot of my students don't necessarily want to become academics, and so the mentoring there becomes quite different. For students who are interested in academic positions, then I make sure they publish a presentation, they do presentations, they understand what's required of an academic, and they understand just how challenging it is to get a job. I mean, tenure-track positions are not increasing. Temporary visiting, faculty in residence positions, part-time positions are really increasing in academia, and understanding what salary ranges are as a beginning professor, especially if you're into social sciences. I mean, the sciences, I think, are quite difficult. The social sciences, I mean, you're like, really? Is that all I'm going to get? And then I had a mentoring group with faculty and talk about what kind of practices do you do to kind of get your mindset in a writing mode. Sometimes, psychologically, we know that it's important to do something physical to get your mind to transition from coming into your office and doing your daily tasks to sitting down and focusing on writing. Some people, one gentleman said he had a specific hat that he would put on. So he would put on a specific hat. And he said, believe it or not, it would work. So, understanding practices that writers use. Having a special space, putting on a hat, using a timer, the 15 minutes a day, blocking out time. There are different strategies that you can use to become a writer, and I think the more you do it, the better you are at it.
Take an article or a book that you really like, that you read and you really understood and you enjoyed, and I would literally sit paragraph by paragraph in the introduction, diagram it, say what work is this paragraph doing for this introduction, and make yourself a list. Paragraph 1 does this work, paragraph 2 does this work, and then just borrow that formula right here, and then you'll over time adapt that formula to something that feels more comfortable to you. But just to see what it is that you like about the articles that resonate with you, rather than just liking them, sort of think about them methodologically, helps you think about writing as just a task. When you write something, each paragraph is working for you. So if you think about it that way, it's less intimidating, because then it's not like, can I write a beautiful sentence? Can I make a huge point? It's sort of like, this paragraph has to do this work, right? Or an introduction needs these 6 things. And so I'm going to do a paragraph for each one. Is it the most beautiful introduction you've ever read? No, but it's really effective. And then it starts to demystify that final product, which is, so it's hard to read things written by people who are really good at it and see yourself in it. But I think if you diagram it, it helps. But burst that bubble a little bit.
I think one of the, I know this is a question, one of the things that I find most challenging with students is the fact they have multiple ideas in one paragraph. And what I tell them is, your first sentence in a paragraph should be your thesis statement. It should really tell you what the idea you want to project in that paragraph. And you should have 2 or 3 supporting sentences to do that. So outlining while we don't want to outline while we write, highlighting all of your thesis statements, and make sure that it says exactly what you want that paragraph to do, and then bullet the following sentences. And then the other thing, which is very cumbersome, but one of my professors suggested that I do this, is to cut all my paragraphs up, like once I have a paper, and cut the thesis paragraph and order it on the floor to see if it makes sense. Because organization is another thing. You know, you jump from idea to idea, you have multiple ideas in a paragraph, but if you can cut your sentences and line them up on the floor and it makes sense, then more than likely your paper is going to be really readable. And one of the gauges that I use, if it takes me an hour to do 2 pages in your writing is not that great. So you need to work on that. That means I'm trying to understand what you're trying to communicate to me, and it's not easy for me to understand or follow the flow. So organization is really big, and making sure you don't have multiple ideas in one paragraph is also sort of a big thing that I see in graduate student writing. And I do it myself too, and I sometimes have to separate it.
And I think the other thing is to recognize what kind of writer you are, right? Some people are the one perfect sentence at a time kind of writer. Some people, I'm not that kind of writer. I'm the kind of writer where I have to write a lot of garbage to get to the place where I'm like, oh, this is what I want to say. And so I really encourage my students to actually write really bad sentences like, this, I am talking about this topic because it is really important for this reason. Like, that's terrible, right? But if you can get that, that's your beginning of your sentence. This is really important to me because, then you say why it's important. You can just go back and erase that first part, and it just goes away, and then what comes after that is actually usually a pretty good sentence, or close to a pretty good sentence. Nobody ever has to see the garbagey part at the beginning. The garbagey part just gets your mind going, and then the ideas come out, because one of the biggest problems students have, right, is not like putting multiple ideas in a paragraph, but not saying what they really think, right? Dancing around. But if you say in the sentence, I think this is important because, then you say why you think it's important, and just erase the junk, right? That's the beauty of writing on a computer, is that you can write all kinds of garbage that doesn't show up in the final draft, but that is pushing you to, answer that big so what question, which is
proofread.
Yeah, and proofread, exactly.
So you need to do the mental hard work of actually organizing your thoughts to be able to communicate them. But if you can communicate them verbally, that should translate, I think, to the page. Also, if one's giving presentations, like if you intentionally sign up to give a regional conference presentation that's 15 minutes in length, it will force you to have to do things by time frames that will advance your thinking in ways that will benefit our perspectives. So I use that, or submitting a manuscript for publication. I sometimes do that to myself too, to know that I've got 12 projects. This will force me to do something by this date, and to do it well and clearly, because I know there's an audience that will frown at me if I do a poor job otherwise. And then also take advantage of things like reading groups with your fellow grad students. So do you share ideas? So Nia, do you ever workshop your manuscripts with fellow grad students?
Not yet.
You should. That's a process. You see that. I'm not perfect either, but I pushed till I got stuck in the writing. And then thank you for your feedback in this open discussion in a reading group. And watch how this will now escalate to me getting this published because of your feedback.
Right. So her work really has nothing to do with the field that I am writing about, but she's interested, right? And so I write with her kind of in my mind, and I explain it in a way that I think would make sense to her. Which forces me actually to explain more, because I know she's not kind of inside my head and she hasn't read the books that I've read or done the research that I've done. Where when you get stuck, right, you think, well, if I had to explain it to this person, how would I explain it? And then that, I think, also gets you to write in a way that's more reader-based rather than sometimes just spinning your wheels, which can happen, especially if you're thinking about something complicated. And, like I'm a lateral thinker, so I have everything all spread out, and then I have a really hard time piling it back up, because I need somebody to say to me, what is this about, right? And so for me, Jill, my roommate, is that person, even though I don't see her very much on a regular basis. And so I think it helps, right, to have these little kind of devices that help you.
Because you can look at a particular topic that you're interested in, but you might look at a completely different population. Maybe a study with a population hasn't been done, right? So there might be a particular methodology that you're really fascinated with. I don't often
don't think that we train our students to think about methodology unless you're doing statistics and coming up and trying to perfect a particular methodology. But, you know, what's the problem that you want to that you're interested in, and what are the ways of approaching that? You know, I tell students to read when they read for multiple things. Look at population, look at methodology, look at what the problem is, look at the framework that they're using. So you might do something similar with a different framework in mind. What theories inform that particular study? Is there a different set of theories that you might be able to use or test to inform that study? So, I mean, you're reading for multiple purposes, and that can be really difficult. That's why I said you keep, you know, buckets of things that fascinate you and interest you, and people who are studying in that area to kind of get a better idea. It comes together, it really does. You're in a cloud, and it's really nebulous, and then there comes the 11th hour, and you finally get it. You're like, oh my God, why couldn't I get this a year ago? It's a different kind of writing, dissertation, really. And it's not even research writing. I mean, research paper writing, right? In research, you just kind of, it's very passive. You just kind of cite works to support your argument. But when you're writing a dissertation, you're actually a lawyer making an argument. You're using literature to support your argument.
Which is that you really want a committee that brings different perspectives to your work. Where, not that you want a committee that would fight with each other, but you want to get different things from each committee member, so that you do get exposed to or sent, you know, articles that you might not stumble upon in other ways, and you do get different kinds of advice about you know, how they see where you fit into that academic conversation, because you're right. Part of the work of a dissertation is to, in a sense, argue for the contribution that